verse 3. It's interesting. We have the etnachta on the first word, right? That happens sometimes. This is like a semicolon in English. So basically you stop here for a second. So, Vayoma, and he said, and then we're like done, right? Adonai, Ina matzati, cheyn b'einecha, al na ta'avor me'al avdekha. So he calls these three men, look at this, Adonai. He says to them, Adonai. So continuing with just our plain reading of the text. My lords is what that means. In fact, even when we pray Adonai, the word means my lords. Right? So there's kind of, I think even we can see a more ancient tradition here, understanding the concept of Adonai's complex unity, right? That he is lords, plural. Now the naysayers to that would say, no, this is just the, what's it called? The royal plural, right? The plurality of royalty. Can be. Quoting from my book, Adonai referring to the guests as Adonai. I just found a mistake in the book. Should be Avraham, referring to the guests as Adonai, causes varied opinions among the sages. Ibn Ezra understands it as my lords, plural, as does Rashi, while Maimonades renders it as my lord. Strangely. So when he's saying my lord, this means he's understanding it as Hashem, you understand? Clearly something supernatural has been noticed by Avraham, and he has selected his wording appropriately. Avraham's no fool. He speaks carefully. He chooses his words carefully. So my lords, imna matzati, if now I have found cheyn, favor, b'einecha, in your eyes, in your sight, al na ta'avor me'al avdekha. So this is please now. See, he's using a soft form of al. Please now do not. Please don't cross over. Again, we're just going to be literal with this. Don't cross over. Me'al, from over, avdekha, your servant. Okay? Can also mean from with your servant, but do not cross over. This, see, to me, I can't read this without thinking that Avraham understands there's another dimension or something, and that when divine beings or angels or something like this, when they come down from the sky, it's not just like today we think, well, where are they going, right? When Yeshua raised up into the air on the 40th day of the Omer, and he ascends into Tui Uranui, so into the heavens, into the sky. What does that mean? Does it mean he left Earth's orbit and then he continued towards Jupiter and then he took a left and he's going to go to Sirius, the stars? What does it mean? Clearly, we're not talking about normal time-space. It's not like heaven is someplace else in the Milky Way, right? Instead, there's a dimensional shift. And so it seems like Avraham recognizes this, at least to me when I see this language. Don't cross over, like don't go back into your dimension from being with your servant yet. Sforno comments on this, al not avor, he addressed the one whom he considered. Okay, so Sforno's noticing that up here, Avraham is using plural language, Adonai, right? And there's three men. But why is the verb in the singular? Now, this can go either way. If you guys remember, the word that we render into English as God or gods is Elohim, right? We translate Elohim as God or gods, depending on context. And so, when we're talking about the one true God, we use a verb in the singular, right? But when we're talking about pagan gods or about angelic beings or something like that, then the verb goes to the plural. This word is the same, Elohim, right? The im ending in Hebrew, that's the plural. Elohim. It's like an S in English, right? For masculine things. Elohim. Gods. But if it's our God, the verb says he did it, right? Asa Elohim, God did. And the verb is saying he did. But if we're talking about angels, we have to say asu. We make it plural, right? Angels are gods of the nations or whatever, this sort of thing. It's plural. You understand? So this is what Sforno is addressing. Why does Avraham say Adonai in the plural here, but then the verb goes to singular? And his explanation is he addressed the one of them whom he considered the senior one of the three, saying, do not merely deliver your message and leave immediately, but take some refreshment first. This is Sforno's take on it. You could look at it from another way. You could say, if this is some kind of Avraham's recognizing at least that one of them is an aspect of Adonai, right? Like I told you, the sages have a lot of discussion about this, because why is he addressing these guys as Adonai, right? This is something we usually use. It can be secularly used, right? You can talk about, like in Hebrew, in modern Hebrew, Adoni, right? This is kind of like sir, right? Like my Adon, right? Sir, today. You could say Adoni, sir, please, get on the train already. We're waiting, right? And if it was a bunch of guys, you could say Adonai, right? You could. So this can go either way. But we have a singular here. So he's either addressing one of them or he's understanding the Adonai to be the God. Please don't cross over. This verb, as most Hebrew roots teachers will happily provide, means crossover, right? You probably heard that for sure, no matter what your background is. What could it mean here? Yeah, I kind of spilled the beans already on this. I think it means don't go back to the dimension you came from, to the spiritual realm. Stay here with me. His language, referring to himself, he says, avdekha. This is kind of interesting. Your servant. Avdekha, this is how King David often refers to himself when talking to God in the Psalms. Instead of saying I, he uses it almost like a pronoun. He says, avdekha, your servant. Right? It's a way that the king can humble himself. He's the king of the land, but he still, when talking to God, refers to himself as your slave, your servant. And Avraham does the same thing at this moment, which is interesting. And I want to share a little bit from this commentary by Sarna, a modern Jewish commentator, which I think is pretty interesting. He says, the English translation obscures some difficulties in the Hebrew text. The verbs in verse 3 are in the singular, right? That's what I was talking about, indicating that only one of the strangers is spoken to, whereas those in verses 4 through 5 are in the plural. Genesis Rabbah, this is a famous midrash, 48:9, Rashi and Ramban explain that Avraham addresses himself to the leader, but not that his invitation applies to all three. Another problem is the opening vocative, which is in the plural, Adonai. Right? So this could be, oh, my lords, right? He's treating it as a vocative there. Oh, my lords. Oh, Adonai. With a final long vowel. You see the long vowel? The use of which is otherwise reserved for God. Rabbinic opinion, he's quoting the Talmud here, Shevu'ot 35b, is divided as to whether Adonai is, in this instance, secular or sacred. Rashi and Ibn Ezra understand it to mean my lords. Maimonades renders it my Lord. So much disagreement here with this mysterious verse among Jewish scholars throughout the ages and even the midrash itself. Someone lost audio. Maravik says no audio. Does everybody else hear me okay? Are you guys hearing me? Okay. Alec hears me. Great. Okay. Thank you, Simone. Okay. Sorry, I think it's on your end there. Sister? Okay. Verse 4. Yukachna me'ad mayim rachatzu ragleichem v'hisha'anu tachat ha'etz. Okay. Don't look at my note there yet, Mark. All All right, let there be taken, please, a little bit of water. And now he's back to the plural. Avraham's back to the plural, right? We had al na ta'avor, don't cross over, please, talking to one guy. And now he's in the plural. Maybe he's also baffled. V'rachatzu, this is plural. And wash, raglechem, your feet. And like lean against, really is what it's saying. Lean against, maybe relax yourself underneath the tree, right? So this is presumably the great terebinth of Mamre that he's talking about. Okay, glad you got it worked out and everything. Always mention it like she's mentioning. That's fine, folks, because I want to know if I'm just blah-blahing and people can't hear. Now, this act of washing the feet, you know, in the Middle East, back then, people wearing sandals and such, they would go on the road and there's lots of dust, and it was really appreciated to have like a station where someone could wash their feet. So I want to read to you from Yochanan chapter 13, verses 3 through 8. This is the ESV translation. I just changed Jesus to say Yeshua. Yeshua, knowing that the Father had given all things into his hands, and that he had come from God and was going back to God, rose from supper. So by the way, you see, guys, there's cases to be made. He's from God, he's going to God, but isn't he God? So you can kind of see there really are arguments to be made on both sides of the fence on this issue. So I think it's a mistake to just discount people if they don't believe Yeshua is God proper or something like that. So going back to God, rose from supper. He laid aside his outer garments, and taking a towel, tied it around his waist. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel that was wrapped around him. Now so he's gone from being a good host, providing the water is what the good host would do, and then you wash your own feet, right? To be washing their feet, this is really a servant's action, right? This is like Avraham in the previous verse referred to himself as avdekha, your servant. Yeshua is acting like a servant now. He's behaving like a servant. So he began to wash the disciples' feet and to wipe them with the towel that was wrapped around him. He came to Shimon Kepha, Simon Peter, who said to him, Lord, Adonai, do you wash my feet? Yeshua answered him, what I am doing you do not understand now, but afterwards you will understand. Kepha, Peter, said to him, you shall never wash my feet. Yeshua answered him, if I do not wash you, you have no share with me. I want to read you an interesting comment on this by Keener. He's got a nice 2-volume commentary on the book of John, which is really wonderful. Okay, oops, we have Jesus Yeshua. Jesus Yeshua. This is because in my software program, I created a filter in the script that anytime a commentary shows Jesus, it makes the word Jesus super small so you can't read it, and it substitutes Yeshua. so I copied then from my Bible program, and I forgot to change that to say just Yeshua. So that's not a different Messiah. There's no Jesus Yeshua. It's just Yeshua. So by so serving, Yeshua prefigures his death as the suffering servant of Isaiah 53 on behalf of the many. Unlike Greco-Roman society, Judaism stressed humility. But like other societies, it also upheld societal roles. Yeshua overturns even positions of social status. Rabbi R'Yehuda Hanasi, oftentimes if you hear the Talmud or something just talking about Rav, they'll just say Rabbi without a title. This is who they're talking about. Judah, the prince, is what that means. Judah the prince, about 220 AD, was said to be so humble that he would do anything for others, except relinquish his superior position. Seating according to rank was crucial, right, in the Sanhedrin and synagogues. Yeshua goes beyond even this, even beyond Rav Yehuda Hanasi. Okay, I'm sorry, I took it from a different commentary. The same scholar. It's Keener who wrote the commentary that I like, but this is from another book he wrote. Yeah. Okay, there's some comments here. Great. Looking forward to seeing what you guys wrote. So Tet writes, when Avraham saw the 3 men, was in the spirit realm, in meditation. Before this, I was thinking why Avraham didn't fall from the glory he had seen. Then I remembered reading he was then in depth meditation from the pain he was feeling. His spirit rose. That very could well be. Yep. Also, he would have been in a very high state, having done such a difficult mitzvah so immediately and so zealously. Tet continues on to say, also read, these three men were Michael. Yeah, there's rabbinic commentary that believes that the leader of the group is Michael. Chesed always brought good news. Gavriel represented news, impending destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah, and Raphael to heal. Yeah, that is one of the traditional viewpoints. But it's important to keep in mind, folks, when you read the commentaries on verse 3, Genesis 18, verse 3, there's a lot of disagreement because, as I said, the language is strange. It's not that the Hebrew language is strange, but the way Avraham switches between singular, between the vocative and the plural in addressing them as second person plural, and when he switches to second person singular, the verbs that are chosen, like I said, can mean they've crossed over from the spirit realm or this other dimension or something like this. And that Avraham apparently is aware of it. So it's very possible what you said there, Tet, that he's in meditation or something, right? And that's why he has to look up. I would take issue with the concept of all three of them being angels, that particular interpretation, because two leave and one remains and is very clearly speaking in the voice of God, right? When coming up later, when Avraham is making a deal with God, right? Let's make a deal. When he's doing that good Jewish practice of haggling, he's haggling with God, right? It's where we get it from, our ancestor. He's haggling. You know, it's funny regarding Jewish haggling. When I was in Taiwan for one day one time. I had a long layover at the airport, and so I decided to run out and see the city. And yuck, let me say, from the idolatry and stuff that's there. But and you can just feel the feeling to me spiritually in Bangkok. I'm not talking about all of Thailand. Pardon me, Thailand, not Taiwan. Thailand. The feeling was just like there's such spirits roving everywhere. And everywhere, there's idols being sold, there's shops selling idols, and there's all this stuff. But anyway, I forgot why I mentioned that. What was the connection? Oh well, maybe it'll come back later. Sorry about that, folks. Story time. Yeah, sure. No microphones, okay, guys? Just type. This is different than our Hebrew class, yeah? So, yeah, in the Shabbat Josh, you can interact by typing in the chat, okay? Don't be embarrassed, don't worry. But, yeah. So he's addressing one of them very clearly as the divine, right? When he's making, I remember what I was going to say. when I would be haggling at a place, and they sometimes would ask me, where are you from, right? Or what's your nationality, or they'd ask something like this, and I didn't want to say American because I didn't want them to think like, rich guy, right? And so I said, Israeli, and they would look so sad. You have to understand, many of the Thailand is the most popular vacation spot for Israeli soldiers. They do their service, and then when they're done, they take 6 months off and they go to some country. They wander around the world. They take a big long break. Right? They're no longer slaves to the army. And Thailand is a very popular spot because it's cheap to stay there. You don't need a lot of money. Even someone who's been in the army who saved up some can afford, a 6-month stay in Thailand. And so, they were accustomed to dealing with Israelis. And so the merchants, they'd always, frown or look disappointed as they realized they're not going to overcharge me. It's going to be, a good deal. All right, so coming back. So Avraham Avinu was the first haggler, right? The first great haggler, where we get it from. Okay, let's see. Tet writes, yes, now that we are studying this in Hebrew, it's clear that he saw the glory of God. Yeah, he's aware. He's keenly aware, right, that he's dealing with the divine here. Okay. Other comments or questions? Dr. Devera says there's a Jewish synagogue in Chiang Rai, Thailand. Oh, interesting. Very interesting. Yeah, it makes sense. Jews are all over the world. Not everybody's come back yet, right? There's even Jews in the Philippines. All right, verse 5. Genesis chapter 18, verse 5. בחפת לחם וסעדו לבכם אחר תעבורו כי על כן עברתם al avdekha. Okay, we'll stop there at the semicolon for a sec. So now this is an emphatic verb, okay? Avraham's saying like, and probably this vav is emphatic as well, so we probably have a double exclamation point. He's very excited. Let me take is what he's saying. The hey at the end, if you can see it, this little hey at the end of that word, that's what we call an emphatic hey, or other grammars will refer to this as a cohortative verb. It means like, let me do this. Like, may it be so that I will do it. Right? If he just says, ekach, it wouldn't mean, and I will do it, right? But here, it's got the hey at the end. That's a little exclamation point. And the vav, yes, it's vav conversive, by the way, for you Hebrew folks, Hebrew students. But it's probably functioning as what we call vav emphaticum. So another exclamation point. Right, so he's really serious. Like, let me do this. Let me take fat lechem. This is like a morsel of bread is what he's offering. Just a little bit of bread, right? And of course we know he goes and, tells Sarah to make all kinds of stuff, right? He tells the lad to, take a very choice animal and slaughter the animal. And in the midrash, Breshit Rabbah, we're told that it's Yishmael that he selects for this task of slaughtering the animal because he's teaching Yishmael hospitality, right? He wants him to learn hospitality. That's not in the biblical text, who the lad is, but, and he's doing all this stuff, but he's only offering to them. He's only telling them, look, just a little piece of bread, fat lechem. It's like a little piece of bread, like a little chunk of bread like that, like a morsel of bread. So that's all he's offering. So the sages, through rabbinical exegesis, when they look at Avraham's actions and they learn how they extrapolate from that how we should behave, right? Like all times the goyim, they only look at Yeshua, right? But we're looking here at, not always, but we look at all of the good biblical characters. So we can learn from our ancestors, those who behave well. And so in the Talmud Tractate Bava Metzia, page 87, it says, it is written, and I will get a piece of bread. Here it is, the fat lechem. But also, and Avraham ran to the herd. And then a couple verses later, said Rabbi Eliezer, on the strength of the contrast, the lesson is taught that righteous people, notice the same color as Avraham, say a little, but do a lot. You see the Talmudic teaching? A righteous person promises only a little bit, but does a lot. And then the contrary is also true. Wicked people say a lot, but even a little they don't do. Right? It's true, right? It's axiom. So this is something we can learn from. We should try, Rabbi, to exercise this axiom noticed by Rabbi Eliezer in Bava Metzia, that when someone asks us to do something for them, or we're excited about a cause and we want to be part of it, we're talking about donating time or money or something, or we want to, or for kids, if parents ask you to do something, right? It's best to agree to the very minimal, right? Protect yourself from yourself, right? I mean, know thyself, right? If you know that you're a lazy bum and you're not going to give any of your time to help with whatever it is, then, best to just say you won't do anything at all, right? But then when the Holy Spirit convicts you and you decide, okay, I'm going to come and do this, right? And we see this played out in a mashal that the Messiah tells us, right? He talks about two sons, right? The father tells them to do something, and the first son says, I won't do it, right? And, well, the first one says, sure, I'll do it, but then he doesn't, right? And the other one says, I won't go, and then he feels bad and he does it, right? And we see which son loves the father the most. The one who maybe he had an initial sinful reaction, right? An initial, man, I don't want to do that. But he's convicted, just like Rav Eliezer's talking about here, and he goes and he does it anyway. He does more than he said he would do. In this case, he said he's not going to do anything, and he did it. Where the wicked one is happy to get the glory right away. Yeah, I'll do it. I'll do this. I'll dedicate 3 days a week to reading the Psalms all day long. I'll give $10,000 to the kahal. I'll build a kahal. I'll do this, I'll do that, and then they don't do nothing, right? Whereas the opposite is true of the tzaddikim. The tzaddikim are like, I don't know about that. I'll have to think about it, right? Or I can only give you 1 day a week for study, right? I can only show up on Shabbat. I can't do any of the other weeks. I can't go to the Wednesday Bible study. I can't do any of the Hebrew classes. I can't do any of the premieres. And then that person shows up at everything. Who's behaving more righteously, right? So this is the axiom that we should be careful to guard our speech, to not overpromise. Much better to underpromise. This is something that I liked about Europeans who I came across, even secular Europeans, when you'd ask them, hey, do you speak whatever language, right? You speak, German, Spanish, whatever, and they're not from that country, they might say a little bit, right? And then the next week, you see them on the phone having a full conversation in that language. Right? It's not the exact same thing, but I kind of like that, okay, a little bit, but really they know a lot, right? I'm also reminded of in Matthew, when Yeshua talks to us about when you're compelled by someone to walk a mile, go with them too, right? It's a similar concept, but it's transitioning. This is different than just saying that you will, right? When someone sues you for some article of clothing, you give that to them and you also give them your cloak, right? You do more than you're compelled to do, right? That there's something about this type of action, these types of actions that have a spiritual change on the community, the environment around us, when we behave in such a way through chesed, acts of clan loyalty. Okay, let's continue. All right, v'sa'adu. So this is like have a meal that restores you. It's something like that. Libchem, your mind, right? So have a meal so your mind will be restored. Literally, it says your heart, right? Now, look here. It's kind of interesting. Okay. So we were switching from plural before to singular, and again, it's happening. Avraham, it seems like he's not really sure how to talk to these guys. So now he's saying, L'bechem, chem is plural. You alls. Y'all's heart, y'all's mind. So that your mind will be back in order from your journey, right? It must take a lot out of you to teleport from the spiritual dimension or whatever. Achar ta'avuru, after you will cross over, or you have crossed over. This is an example of imperfect being used in past. Ki al kain, for what purpose? For this purpose, because of this. Avartem, you all have crossed over al avdekhem, to your servant. And now he's using the plural, avdekhem. Previously he said avdekha, your servant, avdekha. And now it's avdekhem. Paul, so Avraham himself is switching between second person singular, like just one person he's talking to, and between the plural. Through his speech itself, you can understand he's speaking to the lot of them, all three of them, and he's also speaking just to one of them. Back and forth and back and forth. And it gets even more interesting here in what's coming up. Look what's coming up. See this double box I have here in blue and the next word out? See the u at the end of this verb? It says, Vayamlu cheyn. And they said, the u means they said, cheyn. Yes. Or such. I'm sorry, yes is modern Hebrew. It's more like such. Ta'aseh kasher dibalta. You shall do according to how you have spoken. Now, what's weird about this, folks? Let me put a prompt question here. Okay. Who are these men who seem to answer in unison? It says they said, cheyn, ta'aseh kasher dibalta. It's like, you understand? It doesn't say he said. They said. So all of them are saying this. So I imagine them like speaking in unison, right? If we're just being very simple with the pashat meaning of the text, the plain meaning of the text, these guys seem to be all talking at the same time in unison. These apparent guys, let's say. Clearly they're not anashim, they're not men. Okay. Any comments or questions? Here's another question for you guys, another thought. What will they do with the food Avraham will present to them? Right, so I have a friend who thinks that the divine beings did not really come down and intermingle with humans. A couple friends, right? You know, the Genesis 6 passage we have where the sons of God saw the daughters of men and they descended and they took from them wives, right? Whoever they wanted. And then their sons were called the Nephilim, right? And the Nephilim which some translate that as fallen ones, but it's probably from Aramaic, meaning giants, right? Giants. So the sons of these, whoever they were, these sons of God is the title, the B'nai Elohim. And so a couple of my friends, they don't think that that's really what happened, right? There's something else happening here. It's not angelic beings. The Book of Enoch is wrong. Jubilees is wrong. All the Second Temple literature is off about that, right? So if that is your opinion, I would challenge you then. Oh, and one thing that one of them has expressed is that angels cannot sleep with people, right? And by the way, if you hold this opinion, no problem. This is not like this is not a necessary theological position to have, right? It's not a faith issue or something. But just ferreting it out, thinking about it, and one of my friends brought up the verse in the apostolic writings about how when Yeshua asks, he's kind of given this riddle, this lady was married and her husband died and it keeps happening, so who will be her husband in heaven? And he responds saying that angels in heaven are not. It's not like here on earth. Basically, they're like little children, right? They're not given or taken into marriage, right? Okay. So I would just push back to that response. I would push back and say, those are the angels who are in heaven. The guys who did this terrible sin, they're not in heaven. That was part of the problem, that they broke the natural order. They did what they weren't supposed to do, at least if we go with Enoch, with Jubilees, and other Second Temple literature, right? And even it seems that Jude goes on with this, saying that those who initially did this are now in chains of gloomy darkness, right? They've been cast down to Tartarus, right? And so if they cannot have sex, if they don't do normal physical things, then why would they eat, right? And so this is kind of the question I'm posing here. What will these guys do if they are angels with the food Avraham will present to them? Seems kind of like not good behavior to make someone prepare all this food and it's just going to be wasted, right? And then I have another, following on to that, we have then, what does this tell us about angelic beings and physical functions, eating, sex, etc., right? And even the resurrection body, the body of resurrection. The resurrected Yeshua, we know that he ate, right? He ate with the disciples. So even having this resurrected body, which is able to teleport and ascend to heaven, cross the dimension, to avar, to cross over into the spiritual dimension. Okay? Any comments or questions? Okay, I think we're doing fine on time. Let me see. Hour 60 minutes, yeah, pretty good. So I basically have some extra slides I was going to share with you if we weren't going too long now. I'm trying very hard to not go to 2 hours like we used to do. Someone writes me in private, can Yeshua be one of the three? I think he is. Yeah. I think he's the one that Avraham makes the deal with, right? That Avraham haggles with, and who he's able to see without being blinded and having his eyes fall out, his eyeballs fall out, right? But that's just my opinion, based on patterns throughout Scripture, right? It's difficult to make that absolute claim. This is the end of part 2. Please watch part 3, the conclusion of our Shabbat drash. This drash was brought to you by the letter Sin, useful for making an S sound. To stand with us, please use our patreon.com account. Make sure to subscribe, thumbs up, and ring the bell. This helps us to bring our message to more users. And check it out down below. You'll find a time-encoded table of contents of the subjects discussed in today's drash. L'Adonai yihyeh kol hakavod. May all the glory be to Adonai.